In 1993, the Washington Bullets drafted a young man. That man was not particularly fast. He was not a particularly great leaper. But he did have one thing going for him. He was 7 feet tall, 7 inches. 7 feet, 7 inches tall. Making him one of the tallest players in the NBA. Of course, I'm referring to George Mirasan if you're a Bullets fan. Now the Wizards, but they'll always be the Bullets, right? George Mirasan, he had no control over his growth, but he did have a pituitary gland issue, that is a gland inside the brain, that was sending him a signal to grow, all right? A hormonal signal. That's what hormones are. They're chemical messengers that tell our body to do something. And in George Mirasan's case, it was grow. The last few weeks, what we've done in exploring the myths of weight loss is, well, a lot of what we think about, calories in, calories out, well, it's just a math problem, right? We figure, well, if I just exercise more, I'm bound to burn more and lose weight. But I debunk that. We figure, well, it's just the calories, so if I just back down the calories, then I should be able to lose X amount of weight. I debunk that. And then we said, well, okay, well, maybe it's not just the calories, but maybe it's the type of macronutrients that we're putting into our body. And if so, it's probably fat, because fat is twice as dense, calorically dense as protein or carbs. But I debunk that. The bigger myth involved in all of those is, well, it's just a math problem. If it's just a math problem, why can't we just lose weight? You know what I mean? And the reason is it's not a math problem, it's a hormone problem. Right? The bigger question is not, well, how much calories am I putting in? How much calories are there? But what is my body doing with those calories? That's number one. And number two, how does your body determine what gets stored and what gets burned? That's a big question. Certain foods that we eat have more of a tendency to be stored as fat, and certain have more of a tendency to be burned up. And understanding how your body determines what gets stored and what gets burned is essential to understanding how to manage weight. So it's a hormone problem, but not the hormone that everyone assumes. Everyone comes in and says, well, it's got to be my thyroid. My thyroid is responsible for my metabolism. And sometimes it is the thyroid, but very rarely the case. In fact, in the majority of cases, the hormone at play is not the thyroid, but insulin. Insulin is a hormone that your pancreas, an abdominal organ in your belly, the pancreas secretes insulin in response to essentially rises in your blood sugar. All right. So insulin, though, wears many hats in our body. The first hat is it's a glucose disposal machine. Okay. And that's where most of us understand insulin to be. You might have heard of insulin in the setting of diabetics. So certain types of diabetics, called type 1 diabetics that don't produce insulin, can develop dangerously high blood sugar levels floating around in the bloodstream because they lack the response for that pancreas to secrete insulin and shift the blood glucose from the compartment in the blood into the cells. And the result is like, clogged plumbing, dangerously high blood glucose levels floating on your bloodstream. Insulin has a much greater role as far as weight management, and that is that insulin is our fattening hormone. Insulin drives the fattening process. Okay, so the more insulin your body is secreting, the more it's shifting your energy into your fat cells. And it does it by two mechanisms. So first, basically, by shifting glucose, blood sugar, into the fat cell, okay? And the second is it acts on this enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which is on the fat cell, and the action of this lipoprotein lipase enzyme, or catalyst, is to take floating blood triglycerides, which are fat molecules in your bloodstream, break it down into its component parts, and allow those components to go into the fat cell. So that's the process at the cellular level of how we get fatter. All right. But the point is that what drives all of this is insulin. So the more insulin and fat that individual fat cell gets, and the wider your waistband gets on a macroscopic level. That's why that it's a hormonal process, okay? Not just a caloric process, but whatever drives the insulin will drive the fattening. These are what we call hyperinsulinemic states. These are all states that whereby insulin is just naturally higher, okay? All cases, in cases weight gain, diabetes, prediabetes, gestational diabetes, another syndrome called polycystic ovarian syndrome, sleep apnea, menopause, andropause, which is the male equivalent of menopause, and the final one is excessive carbohydrate consumption. The point is a lot of this stuff we have no control over. We can't control over getting into menopause, but we can control our carbohydrate consumption. And by controlling the carbohydrate consumption, we can control our insulin levels. And that's what this is about. That's what the whole class is about. Taking control of your body. Not using medications, but just managing your health by managing the way you eat. All right? And that's going to bring me to next week, which is going to be, well, how do we, taking that knowledge, how do we manage our carbs so we manage our insulin? Thanks for tuning in to Weight Loss Myths with Dr. Crisco. To learn more about weight loss myths, check out my website, mythicalweightloss.com. And to learn how you can effectively lose weight and keep the weight off, check out my book, The Ping Pong Diet.